Good morning. It is Saturday, July 19th. Today, may every day be another wonderful secret. Those are the alleged words of Donald Trump in an old birthday message to Jeffrey Epstein, as reported by the Wall Street Journal, which Trump is now suing.
Trump is now in a full-blown meltdown as MAGA anger over the Epstein files reaches a fever pitch, with the president trashing many of his own supporters as weaklings.
Meanwhile, Attorney General Pam Bondi still has a job and is vowing to unseal Epstein grand jury testimony at Trump's request, with both of them hoping that the testimony will contain enough to quell a MAGA world that wants so much more than it's gotten so far. So grab your coffee and settle in. Welcome to the weekend. Welcome to the weekend. I'm Eugene Daniels, along with Jonathan Capehart. Jackie Alemany is on parental leave. We begin this morning on day 13 since the Trump administration pissed off his MAGA base over the Jeffrey Epstein files, with no signs that Donald Trump has been able to regain control. In what appears to be an attempt to placate his supporters, Trump's DOJ asked a federal judge on Friday to unseal grand jury testimony related to Jeffrey Epstein and his close confidant, Ghislaine Maxwell. Not only do judges rarely agree to release such materials, which the law requires remain secret in almost all cases, but it would amount to just a fraction of the evidence collected in the investigation, a far cry from what his base has asked for. And after being besieged by increasingly bad news related to Epstein, Trump filed a libel lawsuit on Friday seeking at least $10 billion with the B dollars in damages against the parent company of the Wall Street Journal News Corp, its publisher Dow Jones, two reporters for the newspaper, News Corp chief executive Robert Thomas, and its owner Rupert Murdoch. He's suing everybody. The suit follows Trump's denial of the Journal's report that he had written a racy birthday letter to Epstein back in 2003. It's the morning, so we'll keep it cute. That, the paper says, featured a hand-drawn outline of a naked woman with Trump's signature placed below her waist, with a typewritten note that concluded with "Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret." I wonder what that secret was. The Journal said the letter, along with other birthday messages for Epstein, were among the documents examined by DOJ officials who investigated Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell years ago, according to people who have reviewed the pages. The lawsuit cites the fact that the Journal did not include a picture of the letter or the drawing in the article, claiming it failed to do so, quote, because no authentic letter or drawing exists, and that defendants concocted this story to malign President Trump's character and integrity to deceptively portray him in a false light. And late last night, a spokesperson for Dow Jones released a statement saying, quote, "We have full confidence in the rigor and accuracy of our reporting and will vigorously defend against any lawsuit." We all hope that defense is showing that picture. Joining us now, MSNBC senior White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, MSNBC legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Christy Greenberg, and former GOP communications director Tara Setmeyer. She is the co-founder and CEO of the Seneca Project. I want to start with you, Vaughn, because every single person I have talked to around Trump, in the White House, in the administration, in Florida, who has talked to Trump, says that he's as angry as they've ever seen. And I keep asking why, because this is a man that gets angry very fast. And what they tell me is that he's riled up because of the lack of control and his inability to pull this back. Like I said in that intro, we're 13 days into this.
And it's not like members of Congress are running out in front of cameras. It's not like his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, is holding a press conference saying the president has done nothing wrong. Mm-hmm. Guys, there's nothing else to see. Instead, she went to Alcatraz on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. This is a moment where the president is vulnerable, and he is facing questions at the White House, shouted questions about what else may be out there. And it even led to the point where there was, you could say, some concession. Mm-hmm. I mean, a smaller one from the president calling for the Department of Justice to unseal these grand jury transcripts. Of course, that's not all the evidence. Right. It's not all the Epstein files. But at some point, we are not used to seeing the president concede any ground, and he actually did in this case.
Yeah. Christy? Let's talk the legal aspects here, because I found it fascinating that the president, when he put out that social media post saying, I command AG Bondi to release pertinent grand jury testimony. Please explain to viewers, if they don't already know, why the word pertinent is significant here and why the focus on grand jury testimony is significant here. This might be a concession by the president, but it's a concession with a small c.
Absolutely. So the grand jury testimony that they are seeking is testimony in the Southern District of New York in connection with charges that were brought against Epstein and Maxwell. And apparently they're also looking in Florida to unseal grand jury testimony as well. But the grand jury presentation there would have focused on all the evidence they wanted to show the guilt of Epstein and Maxwell. It is, I feel extremely confident that you are not going to see anything in that grand jury presentation if it were unsealed, which is a big if, I actually think doubtful, but if it were unsealed, there wouldn't be anything about Donald Trump in there. And one reason I feel very confident that is the case, I went back last night and I was looking at my former boss, former SDNY U.S. Attorney Jeff Berman's book, Hold the Line. He has chapters about Epstein in there. And one thing he said was that before the Epstein indictment was brought, he never briefed AG Barr about the investigation. If there were going to be major revelations about Donald Trump, who at the time was the president, in a grand jury presentation about sex trafficking, that would have required them to go and brief the Attorney General. So the fact that they did not do that tells me very confidently that you are not going to see anything in that grand jury transcript about Donald Trump. And also, as to his base, highly doubtful you're going to see a lot that would incriminate other people, because that was not their focus. Their focus was on these individuals in those two presentations. But just taking a step back, I would say it is unlikely that you're going to get the names of victims or the names of confidential witnesses or other third parties, if they even exist in those grand jury transcripts. Unlikely that you get them, just because it is so difficult to unseal grand jury transcripts that are secret. Public interest in a scandal is not enough alone. You have to have more. And these people have a significant privacy interest, safety interest, and reputational interest in not having their names revealed. So this is before Judge Berman. He's a very seasoned senior judge. I don't see him unsealing all of it. Maybe he unseals parts of it that were already redundant and are already public, but he's not going to unseal all of these grand jury transcripts. And to your point, again, this is a small piece of what is there. And there are other parts of this, I think, that could potentially mention Donald Trump. It's just not going to be here. It's a red herring.
And that's the key thing. The grand jury testimony is secret and under seal, and it's not like a public record that you just go out and hand out willy-nilly.
Right.
But I digress.
Tara, one of the things that's been so, I guess, interesting about this is one of the only times where we've seen an extended period of time where Donald Trump's base has been upset with him, continue to be upset. They've talked about, in different interviews, feeling betrayed in many ways. What do you think it is about this scandal, this issue, that is getting them so riled up in their inability to kind of let it go and forgive their guy?
Well, this is the only interesting thing. There's a lot of interesting things about this entire debacle that's happening. The dynamic is quite fascinating because, like you said, it's the first time that Donald Trump's BS is BS to his base that they don't want to hear. He's lied to his base multiple times. He lies to them all the time. He's incapable of really telling the truth about, frankly, anything. But this is the first time that the lie isn't what they want to hear. The MAGA math ain't mathin' for them. And they're going, wait a minute. Hold on, you promised us that when you got into power, you'd put your people in the Justice Department and we would uncover this huge cabal. You have to remember, there's a large portion of Trump's MAGA base that came from QAnon. And the QAnon conspiracy was all about sex trafficking and pedophiles and this weird underground, liberal Democrat cabal of pedophiles and all this kind of other wacky stuff. And Epstein was at the epicenter of that. So they were waiting. And so you had his own people telling his MAGA base that they had it on their desk. Pam Bondi said it on Fox News. And there's multiple documented interviews and statements where this was promised to them. So when it didn't come, it didn't make sense. And then Trump changed the story multiple times because it didn't make sense and the MAGA base wasn't accepting it. So for this, that's why he's throwing this temper tantrum. That's why he's tired of having to defend Pam Bondi, according to reports, because he's like, okay, I've had enough of this. What do you mean it's not working? He's used to getting his own way with them. This judge, this idea of, well, we'll send it to the, release the grand jury stuff. Again, that's a distraction because he knows now that the foil will become the judge. The judge is probably not going to release it for all the reasons we just heard. So then Trump can turn the ire to the judge. It's this, activist judge. It's not fair, whatever, and take the heat off of him. So this entire fight here is a problem for Trump because this is the first time he's ever attacked his own supporters. The fact that he's gone after them and called them stupid and weaklings, and well, we can debate the veracity of that or not, but coming from Trump, that is a little different. Him going after his own people, saying, I don't need you anymore. I think for folks that are in a cultish type of, personality death cult like MAGA is, that's a little jarring for them because they're like, oh, wait a minute. Why is your leader coming for us? We've been loyal soldiers this whole time. And that's where you start to see the cracks in this. So how Trump gets out of this, I'm not quite sure because the drip, drip, drip is happening. And we're seeing more and more reports about Trump's involvement. It's a little difficult to deny all of this and call it a hoax when how is it a hoax when your own people said it existed? So were you lying to me then or are you lying to me now? And when people start to awaken at that, it's a little difficult to put that genie back in the bottle.
Your own people, and you are one of the people who was fanning this. Christy, before we have to let you go and go to a break, I have one more legal question for you, and that is this. I'm curious. The President of the United States is suing the company that owns the Wall Street Journal and the Wall Street Journal
and the reporters.
This is unprecedented. This is territory we've never been in before. Might there be an Office of Legal Counsel memo or a DOJ memo that will govern how the president operates in this new territory? Will we get to a point where we find out that you can't depose a sitting president, or a sitting president isn't allowed to go through discovery as long as he is president of the United States?
I mean, you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? He filed the lawsuit. He says that he has $10 billion in reputational and financial damages. If you're going to go through with that, you then need to be sitting through the process. Will they try to come up with reasons to shield him throughout this and say he can't sit for a deposition as a sitting president? He's too busy. It would be too much of an issue for him to do that. I'm sure they will, but then you can't file a lawsuit because that's not fair to the other side. So again, he's got to make a choice here. I think he's hoping that they'll cave. Right? And they'll capitulate like many of the other organizations will, or issue some kind of an apology to him. And the fact that they knew days before that this lawsuit was threatened and they held it and they clearly vetted this, I am sure, and they still went ahead with it, tells me that they have the best defense to defamation you can buy, and that is the truth.
I have the receipts. Christy Greenberg, thank you very, very much. We have to sneak in a quick break, but we still have a lot more to talk about. Vaughn Hilliard and Tara Setmeyer are sticking around. And Vaughn, we're going to talk to you about your story from last night. Let me see the videotapes. We'll get into that with Vaughn when we come back. Vaughn Hilliard and Tara Setmeyer are back with us. Okay, Vaughn, I teased that we're going to talk to you about your reporting from last night. Let me see the videotapes. Mark Epstein wants Steve Bannon's 15 hours of unseen footage of his brother. What is this footage?
Right. So
why isn't he calling for it to come
So who's
out?
Mark Epstein? Well, it's his brother that lives in New York. I got him on the phone yesterday, And Mark Epstein has not seen Steve Bannon. Everybody work with me here. Steve Bannon, back in 2019, before federal authorities rearrested Jeffrey Epstein in New York and ultimately imprisoned him, Steve Bannon sat down and worked with Jeffrey Epstein, and according to Mark Epstein, the two men filmed about 15 to 16 hours worth of footage. And Steve Bannon, after Jeffrey Epstein's death, actually had a meeting in New York with Mark Epstein and was talking to him about getting some funding to put together a documentary. Mark Epstein said, no, I'm not giving you any money for this documentary. Well, fast forward 6 years, we're here in the year of 2025, and so far, Steve Bannon, he's only released a 2-minute trailer for this would-be documentary, but the American public hasn't seen this 15 hours of other footage. I reached out to Steve yesterday, haven't heard back from him. He has suggested last week on his own podcast that potentially he may release a documentary come next year, but that goes back to the whole thing of there's 15 hours of raw footage that Steve Bannon has, and while he's calling for full transparency and the unsealing of all the evidence of the Epstein files from the DOJ, he is yet to release his own 15.
I mean, truly make it make sense. That makes absolutely
That's
zero
primary
sense.
source reporting
Right
that Steve Bannon
release
has
all
right
15
there.
hours. 15 hours, put on the
release
internet.
it.
We'll watch it. You know, Tara, outside of the Steve Bannon, I want to look at these polls that we have about the government, whether people feel like the government's hiding stuff from Epstein. So you have this Reuters Ipsos poll. 69% say yes, that the government is hiding alleged client list, even though they say there's not a list. But then if you drill down into Democrats, Republicans, and other, 82% of Democrats say yes, they're hiding a client list. 62% of Republicans say they're hiding a client list. And you know, we're all old enough to remember every once in a while when there's a flare up in MAGA world that folks get over it and move on. Why should I believe in any way, shape, or form that this is actually going to create a real fracture here?
I just want to say something quick about
sustaining fracture.
Yeah, the Steve Bannon thing, just real quick. Remember that Elon Musk said that Steve Bannon was in the Epstein files. So he also has some explaining to do, and grifters are going to grift. So it is beneficial to him to keep the conspiracy theory going and to shift focus away from potentially his involvement, if there is, according to Elon Musk, or not, by turning it into another mysterious, oh, I have it, I don't have it, I'm going to turn it into a documentary, it's coming. And it's still, you know, grifters are going to grift in MAGA world. There's a lot of money being made with this type of stuff, which leads me to why so many Republicans are upset about this and not letting it go. It's because they're fed a steady diet of this and have been for years. This is years in the making. They created Frankenstein's monster around this, and now they can't control it. So will this be something that has long-term sustainability as a problem for Trump? Potentially. Because if you've spent years telling people that you can't trust the government, but you can trust us when we get there, but then you tell them 5 different stories and then say, well, too bad, you need to believe us. You're like, but wait a minute, we were supposed to.
And then you call them names.
Right, then you insult them when they are listening to you, and then you BS them, they don't believe it. Of course, people are going to continue. It looks like a cover-up. Everybody knows if you have nothing to hide, why do you need to change your story so many times? If you're explaining like this over and over again, you're losing. And so, you know, the polling here, I think, is interesting. However, what MAGA is very good at doing, and what Trump is usually good at doing, is creating an outrage somewhere else for them to go and find it. And I think we're just they're trying to figure out what that's going to be to get them off of this. But it's a little tough because you were either lying then or you're lying now, and people are confused about it. And when it doesn't make sense, they're going to continue to look for something to make it make sense for them.
And speaking of not making sense, Vaughn, in the less than a minute that we have, I just want to put this up. Don Jr., the president's son, came to his father's defense in refuting the Wall Street Journal story. The president on the left, you see, he says, also, I don't draw pictures. That was Thursday. And Don Jr. put up a post. Also, in 47 years, I've never seen him doodle once. Put up the next element.
Look at all the doodles.
What's that?
There's some doodles, honey.
What is that? Doodles. I don't draw pictures.
Those are doodles.
Vaughn, how are they going to explain that?
All I'll just say is I don't know who doesn't draw doodles.
I'm drawing them during the show.
It's all I know is it's a weird denial. I think most people draw pictures along the way in life. One of the ones was like, right, this is not his language, and there was somebody online, an ally, that pointed out he doesn't use the word enigma. I was literally at a campaign rally in which he in Iowa called Ben Carson an enigma, and that's very memorable. And so that suggestion that he wouldn't use that phrasing, well, it's just like I ran right back to that moment, and he actually has.
That's why you got to.
He made money. He made money off the doodles. They auctioned it off. I mean, sold. Come on.
And this is the part, is that this lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal, right? We aren't of the legal background, but we are of the journalism background, and we know that there is an actual malice standard, and it is on Donald Trump and the White House to go prove the Wall Street Journal knowingly posted and recklessly posted inaccurate reporting. That is a high standard that frankly, I would think that the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch, who was in the box watching a soccer game last weekend with Donald Trump, I find that a big stretch that Rupert Murdoch and the Wall Street Journal would publish knowingly inaccurate information.
Yeah, they seem unconcerned, the Wall Street Journal. Von Hilliard and Tara Setmeyer are sticking around and still ahead. Donald Trump's wildly unpopular agenda is starting to catch up with him. And the polls look bad, y'all. They look bad. You're watching The Weekend. As Donald Trump faces a growing pile of legal and ethical scandals, there's one thing that's been getting lost in all the noise. His actual policies are deeply, wildly unpopular. I feel like you probably know that watching this show. So unpopular, in fact, that Trump's disapproval rating has now hit a record high of 55%. That's according to a new Economist and YouGov poll. The drop comes amid growing backlash to the administration's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein case, but the broader trend is clear. This week, Good Trouble protests named for the late Congressman John Lewis have mobilized at more than 1,500 sites across all 50 states as organizers call out what they describe as a sweeping assault on civil rights, democracy, and the rule of law. And that energy is showing up in the numbers. A new CNN poll shows Democrats are significantly more energized than Republicans heading into next year's midterm. 72% of Democrats say they're, quote, extremely motivated to vote. That's a full 22-point advantage over Republicans. Meanwhile, Trump's legislative agenda is tanking in public opinion. Nearly 6 in 10 Americans oppose his so-called Big Beautiful Bill, thanks in large part to its deep cuts to Medicaid and other essential programs, and the GOP knows it. Just this week, Vice President J.D. Vance was in Pennsylvania asking Republicans to, quote, talk to your friends about the bill. Let your buddies know. They probably don't want to, which, let's be honest, is not where you want to be with your signature legislation. Von Hilliard and Tara Setmeyer are back with us. Von, I want to start with some of that polling. One, the CNN poll that finds Trump's approval rating among Republicans and independents. So first, 88% with Republicans, 32% with independents. So he feels pretty good there. But then when you look at his immigration approval also, CNN poll, down 10 points since March, 51% in March, 42% of people approve of how he's handling immigration in July. How is I mean, I've heard them say this over and over and over again to my face, and not that, the polls don't matter. They're fake polls. If he doesn't like it, they're not real polls. But how are they actually looking at these numbers? Because they see it too, and they understand there's a problem.
Well, so far they're not reversing course.
Right.
Which I think is telling in its own way. Because this is a president and an operation around him that feels like they are able to control the numbers. They don't have a history of being overly reactive. And they double down, they make the case or make an explanation. And in this case, just this week, they attack, right. And in this case this week, I mean, we're seeing ICE agents still going into Home Depot parking lots and chasing people. And I think most Americans are familiar with going to Home Depot and knowing that people are looking for work. Right. Human beings are looking for work. And so I think that the images that we have seen over the last 3 months tell a very real story of people living in this country who are running from the Trump administration.
Yeah.
That's very different when people see visually the impact of policy versus in 2024 the idea of mass deportation and the idea that we're going to get rid of criminals, because in this case it wasn't a targeting of, right, for example, using the Home Depot example, it's not a targeting of specific people, it is just going and hoping that you catch criminals.
Right.
You know, Tara, to pick up on something Vaughn just said about President Trump and his administration don't have a history of being overly reactive, and I want to pull up that poll number, that polling that Eugene just brought up about Republicans and their approval of the president's job at 88%. Does that explain why the president and his administration aren't being overly reactive? Because that's the number he most cares about. So he couldn't care less what the overall country thinks about what he's doing. He only cares about what his supporters, what Republicans think about what he's doing. And right now at 88%, there's another poll with him at 90% approval among Republicans. That's what matters to him.
It does, but it's still down from where it had been before. And even Steve Bannon admitted that if you have a 1 or 2% shift in MAGA support for Donald Trump or Republican support for Donald Trump, that Democrats could win 40 seats in the House in the midterms. The swing districts are what the people inside, the strategists inside the White House, understand that those are the districts that matter. It doesn't matter whether Marjorie Taylor Greene wins her district by 80 points or 75 points. It matters if in places like Pennsylvania 8, which is where Donald Trump deployed J.D. Vance this week, which is a swing district that a Republican won, took out a Democratic incumbent by about 1 percentage point. That's why J.D. Vance went there to sell this bill, because he knows that those are the districts that Democrats need to win back. And those are the districts they need to hold if they want to keep control of the House. That's why the Seneca Project created an ad called Big Beautiful Betrayal, going after Donald Trump and the Republicans for voting for this bill. There's nothing beautiful about this bill. And the more that people find out about it, and the more that Republicans have to defend the 17 million people losing health care, grandma or mom getting kicked out of her nursing home, the hungry children losing food assistance, ICE agents, masked ICE Gestapo agents getting more funding than any other law enforcement agency in the history of the United States, now getting more funding at the expense of the American people. And oh, by the way, it's enriching the billionaire buddies of Donald Trump. The more people know about that, the more they don't like it, including Republicans. Fox News' own polls leading up to the passage of the bill showed that less than 50% of Republicans thought that this bill would help their families. The CNN poll that just came out said 57% of Americans think it's bad for the country if Republicans control the House and the White House. So these are not good numbers for the administration. So they're trying to go on offense and set the narrative now. We said at the Seneca Project, no, this is an opening for Democrats to set the narrative now. Get ahead of it. Go on offense now. Make the Republicans defend what's beautiful about everything that they're doing in this. It's not. It's a betrayal. And you do it now. You don't set that narrative 6 months from now. You don't wait until, the midterms are coming. No, the midterms have already started. And Republicans are very good at trying to snatch that narrative and get ahead of it. And we decided, look, if the Democrats aren't going to do it, then the Seneca Project is going to step into the void and do it for them and show them how to win.
And Democrats were, we had the conversation at the beginning of this year. What are Democrats doing? Are they getting out there? That's not a question now.
Right.
They have very clear policies that they can point to, and instead of just saying, fear what Donald Trump is going to be, they can go out and say, this is what Donald Trump is.
Right.
People like Mark Kelly,
yeah.
right? It's not just Arizona. He's going to Michigan next week into John James's congressional district in Macomb County. John James is trying to run for governor now, right? So it's not even just the congressional races, but it's gubernatorial races that are on the line. And Democrats, not even just in their home states, they're looking to get out there, and they are ready, and they have something that they are ready to run on.
Yeah, they can point to something.
The smartest thing that they've been doing. And just to put a big point on it, put up the CNN poll to show how many people are upset about the big, beautiful bill. 61% disapprove of Trump's so-called one big, beautiful bill. Von Hilliard, Tara Setmeyer, thank you both very much for coming back to The Weekend. Still ahead, Donald Trump spent the week whining about the person who appointed Jerome Powell, clearly forgetting that he was the one who tapped the Fed chair in the first place. I've said it once, and I'll say it again. What about Trump's mental acuity? We'll be right back. President Trump raised some eyebrows this week when he alleged that his late uncle John Trump, a professor at MIT, taught Ted Kaczynski, who would later be known as the Unabomber.
My uncle was at MIT, one of the great professors, 51 years, whatever. He was the longest serving professor in the history of MIT, 3 degrees in nuclear, chemical, and math. That's a smart man. Kaczynski was one of his students. Do you know who Kaczynski was? There's very little difference between a madman and a genius. But Kaczynski, I said, what kind of a student was he, Uncle John, Dr. John Trump? He said, what kind of a student? And then he said, seriously good. He said he'd go around correcting everybody, but it didn't work out too well for him. Didn't work out too well, but it's interesting in life.
Ted Kaczynski attended Harvard, not MIT. And even if they had crossed paths, John Trump passed away in 1985, 11 years before Kaczynski would be found responsible for 16 bomb attacks between 1978 and 1996. Trump also seemingly forgot that he was the person who appointed Jerome Powell as chairman of the Federal Reserve back in 2017.
He's a terrible Fed chair. I was surprised he was appointed. I was surprised, frankly, that Biden put him in and extended him, but they did. So, no, we're not planning on doing anything. We're very concerned.
Eugene?
All right.
Okay, look. When he said that, I was like, wait, but you were the one.
You did it,
President
girl.
Trump, you appointed Jerome Powell. President Biden kept him, but it's like kept him. When you appoint the Fed chair, he's there for multiple presidential terms. But
because you don't want to shake things up.
you shouldn't. Yeah. Politics should never be involved in like national economic policy. Right. But I go back to the central question, Eugene.
What is it? What could it possibly
covering the White House?
Possibly be?
Why are we not talking about the president's mental acuity? Especially after seeing what he had to say about Ted Kaczynski, completely making up a story, a history between his vaunted uncle, professor at MIT, and the Unabomber.
Yeah.
Man died 11 years before the Unabomber was discovered to be the Unabomber.
So there's no way they could have had the conversation.
And we're at the same school.
I think there are, we don't have time to play it, but one of our colleagues, Andrew Feinberg at The Independent at the White House, asked Caroline Leavitt about this.
Oh, can we play?
And she and her, you know what? We'll play it.
Let's
Renee,
play
go ahead
it.
and
Let's
play
just
it.
play
We're
it.
going to get in trouble, but go ahead and play it.
Yeah.
Ted Kaczynski was not identified as the Unabomber until 1996, 11 years after John Trump passed away. It would have been impossible for John Trump to have ever discussed the Unabomber with the president. So what was he talking about? And I have one follow-up.
Andrew, with so many issues going on in the world, I'm a little bit surprised you would ask such a question, although I'm not sometimes coming from you, I will say, but I'm willing to give you an answer. Nevertheless, the president's uncle did, in fact, teach at MIT. He was a very intelligent professor. The president's very proud of his family. In fact, the president has a letter from his uncle on the MIT letterhead that sits in the Oval Office dining room. Maybe we'll let you see it sometime.
Eugene, that is the most ridiculous answer. No one said anything about the man not being intelligent, that he didn't teach at MIT.
That's not the issue.
Ma'am.
Not the issue.
Ma'am.
We're going to have to leave it there. We're going to keep talking about it in the break, obviously. Coming